So thank you for the welcome. This evening, I'm going to be talking about a fresh or creative perspective on conflict because there are some new ideas about conflict that you might find really interesting for your relationships and for your ministry and your work. And I'm a couple and family therapist, as well as being the family ministries director. And before I came to the division, I did some voluntary work with the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution, which is run by some Cyrenian group called the Cyrenians, a charity. And they do a lot of work on helping to lower conflict in society, and particularly in families with teenagers. So I learned a lot from them, and it's been really interesting. And this is their website. And they have a really good quiz called Keep the Heed, which is what they say in Scottish. Keep the heed is Scottish for like stay calm in a difficult situation. And it's a very simple quiz. When you get there, you just have to answer a few questions, and it will tell you your conflict type as a circus character, a lion tamer, or an acrobat, or a balance trapeze artist, or a human cannonball. So it has ways of telling you about your conflict style like a circus character and telling you your strengths and your challenges. So it's quite fun to do. Now, Jesus said that blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. And I believe that's because our Father in heaven is the greatest peacemaker ever. The work that he's doing to reconcile everybody to him is the greatest peacemaking mission ever. So when we are trying to reconcile people together and bring peace, then we are the children of God. People can say, wow, you're just like your Father because you also work for peace. So why be peacemakers? Well, unresolved conflict leads to broken relationships. So it's very important to try to find ways to resolve conflict when we can. Not all conflict can be resolved because not everybody wants to participate in the resolution. So we have to understand that. But when conflict is not managed well, it's not sorted out, it tends to lead to broken relationships. And broken relationships then have a negative effect on people's mental health. And conflict in families in Scotland led to homelessness. 5,000 teenagers a year in a country of 5 million became homeless because of conflict in their family. Usually the teenager was living with a parent that was their parent and a parent that wasn't their parent, a step parent, or the partner of their other parent. And that there was often conflict in the family because of these relationships. Many people also leave church because of conflict in their homes or between them and other people at church in different ways. So conflict has profound effect. And when there is a lot of conflict, it causes stress, and then people will say, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm just going to leave. I can't manage this. It's too big for me to solve. When we look at our characters, we can see that there are some character traits that might make us more prone to becoming involved in conflicts, and some that help us to lower the conflict in our lives and the lives of others. So pride would tend to increase perhaps conflict, and humility will tend to find ways to manage conflicts better. Selfishness versus generosity. Being critical and judgmental means that you're more likely to have conflicts with people than if you're accepting and forgiving. If you're suspicious and cynical, then also you're more likely to have a conflict. You'll see the worst in the situation. You'll feel suspicious and not comfortable, whereas those who believe the best in other people tend to have better relationships, and so on. So you can see that our character can help to exacerbate, worsen the problem and potential of conflict, or help us to manage it better. So when the General Conference did a study into why people leave church, and they asked them, what is your first, second, and third reason for leaving church? 60%, more than 60% of the people said their primary reason for leaving church was conflict somewhere in their life. A church, in their own relationship, maybe their marriage had broken down, or there was some other problem related to conflict. When they asked them what the second reason was for leaving the church, it was also conflict related, 30%. And the third reason was 30% conflict related too. So you can see how much is behind people leaving the church, and it is related to conflict. So conflict has a powerful influence on people's ability to stay connected with the church, or to feel that they don't want to come anymore. It's too much to deal with, or they won't be accepted. Conflict is actually quite normal. Every relationship will experience conflict because we're all uniquely different. And actually, the goal of conflict is to help us explore our differences. Oh, this is a sign we're different. We need to talk about this so that we understand each other better. Because when I understand why you do what you do or think what you think, even if I don't agree with it, then I may be able to accommodate it or understand it in some way. So remember that conflict is there to encourage us to talk and find a safe place to explore our differences well, and to have empathy for one another's needs and perspectives, and look for better solutions together. Because when we do that, we learn to have the skills to have less conflicts, because we are creating communities that can talk about their differences. Conflict was also really complex because you can't fully understand all the things that are contributing to a conflict. There are some things we know that are making the conflict worse, and there's some things we just don't know. Different factors inside us, even maybe whether we've had a good sleep or not, or something we ate, or something else that is happening in our life, and this is just the last straw and we can't manage anymore. So there's all sorts of different things that contribute to the way that we have a conflict. And if we were here together, I'd say, think about 5 things that you know that will trigger conflicts in your life, in your relationship, in your community, or in your church. And I'm sure you could think of some of those things. This is a very useful diagram. So on the left side, we have the importance of self, the importance of winning the argument. And at the bottom, there is the importance of the relationship, of caring. And this gives us a grid where we can identify some basic conflict styles. So really the most challenging one for most of us to deal with is the one in the top left-hand corner, directing, controlling. This is where someone says, I am going to win and you're going to lose. And you just know this. There are people who want to win every time. They have more power than us. They can argue better. And when someone wins and we lose, then we start to feel resentful. This isn't fair. We just distrust the person. We become afraid of them because we don't feel like we have control in that situation. And when they win and put us down, it feels miserable. Then there is the quadrant where we're not that bothered about winning. Winning doesn't matter, and the relationship doesn't matter that much. So we'll just avoid each other. We just won't talk about it. And we both lose. That's okay. There is silence and coldness and unresolved conflict. And my grandparents actually lived in this for all the time I was aware of their relationship from being a young child. They lived in the same house, but they had separate living rooms, and I had to visit one in one space and one in the other. And if I spent too long with one or the other would be upset. But they lived in this silence and coldness. Then there is harmonizing that says, I'm not really that interested in winning. That doesn't matter to me, but I care about the relationship. The relationship is important. So therefore, I will actually say, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me if we have pizza or we have an Indian curry. I'll just go with what you want because it's not so important to me. And if you're happy, I'm happy, and that's fine. But if this goes on for a long time, the person that says, it's okay, you have it your way, can start to feel resentful. They can start to feel the other person is perhaps having too much control. It can feel a bit unbalanced. In the middle, there's compromising, which says, I win some and you win some. And that sounds like a good idea. That sounds fair enough, right? I win sometimes and you can win sometimes, but that can be a bit competitive. Well, you have won the last 5 times. Surely it's my turn to win the argument now. The best thing to aim for is collaborating that says, I win and you win. Let's find a way we can both win. And this takes some adjustment. We have to make some adjustments to our goals, but we try to make sure that we both somehow have our way. It takes time, but we're both happy. So in collaborating, might say, okay, so you want pizza and I want to have an Indian curry. So why don't we have pizza tonight and tomorrow we'll have curry. So that way because curry and pizza might be a bit odd, but you can see that way everyone has a chance to have their choice. And it doesn't mean it all happens at once, but it means you find a way that you can both be happy. Takes more conversation, but you learn to know each other better. It's actually better, rather than to have a lot of conflict, to find ways to reduce conflict in the beginning. So we can't get a vaccination against conflict, unfortunately, but we can try to reduce the chances of having conflict. And we can do that by having warm and healthy relationships. The more loved I feel in a relationship, the more I feel your care, the less likely I am to argue with you. And this is where we can build our attention in our homes, in our churches, and other places, because we can do things, live in relationships in a way that will help to lower conflicts with our children, our young people, and in our communities. So there's an interesting story in the Bible where there is a conflict, and it's in 1 Samuel 25, and it's the story of David, Nabal, and Abigail. And Nabal has had shepherds and sheep out in the countryside, and David's men have been helping to protect Nabal's men and Nabal's sheep. And there comes a time in the year when it is normal for the shepherds to have a big festival, and for those who they've helped and the sheep owners to give them food to have a big party. Now, David has several hundred men with him, so he has to find an awful lot of food. And he's been very kind to Nabal. And so he sends a servant to say to him, look, we've been looking after your sheep and your shepherds, and we've been taking care of you and protecting you. It's now time for this big party. Please, can we have some food? And Nabal just gets furious. Who does David think he is? He's some young upstart. Why should I give any food to him? And he becomes really angry with David. And David, when he hears about this, David gets really angry. He says, that's it, I'm done. Nabal is an idiot. I am going to kill all the men in his household. Now, David, we know, can be incredibly self-controlled, because in the previous chapter, he's in the cave with Saul and he could kill him, but he doesn't. He is very self-restrained. He cuts a little bit of his garment and he feels really guilty that he's done that afterwards. So you can see he shows incredible self-control, care, remorse, respect for others. But between the two chapters, Samuel has died. Samuel is his mentor, his friend, and maybe David is grieving. He's not in such a secure place in himself, and this is why he's more vulnerable when Nabal is unkind to him. So David threatens to kill everybody, but a servant runs to tell Abigail. He doesn't run and tell Nabal because Nabal's not very helpful, but he knows Abigail is kind and thoughtful and wise. And so the servant goes to Abigail and she gathers lots of food and she runs to David and gives him all the food and bows down to him and says, you know, you're a wise and strong man. You do not need to have this massacre in your history book. So choose wisely, because you don't need this extra trouble. Because I know you are a good man and you will be a good king and I will serve you. And so Abigail actually does something amazing there. She doesn't know the science, but she has done all the right things to lower a conflict. She's pretty too, and I guess that helps David to soften his heart. And so he's like, okay, thank you. Thank you for stopping me do something stupid. You're a very wise woman. And he thanks her and blesses her. So in this, we see that Nabal is foolish, selfish, proud, greedy, and he stimulates the conflict. And David also reacts to that, but Abigail stays wise and generous, calm, humble, and she helps David to make a better choice and feed his men, so he calms down. There's a lady called Sue Johnson who studied couples having arguments for many years. And what she discovered is that there's big questions under most conflicts that are not what the couple is arguing about. So when she looked at couples, they were arguing about money or children or sex or work. She realized that that wasn't really the argument. They were asking big questions like, do you love me? Do you really care about me? Do you appreciate me? Can you understand what I'm feeling right now? Can you empathize with me? Are you willing and able to help me when I am struggling? Can I trust you? Can I depend on you? And these are the big questions underneath someone's behavior. So when we answer these big questions well, when we show care, when we tell people we appreciate them, when we show we're committed to them, when we support them and we understand their feelings, they are much less likely to have an argument with us. Happy couples will still have conflicts. Bernie and I, we've been married 41 years. He's a pastor. We're both family therapists, and we do have little conflicts from time to time because we are totally opposite personalities on the Myers-Briggs scales. So we'll have a little conflict, but they're less likely to be destructive and have long-lasting implications. Usually within a week, we know we had a conflict, but we cannot remember what it was. So happy couples know how to soothe each other quickly, to repair the relationship after a conflict, to make up and make things healthy again. And the best research shows that when there is a conflict, it's really important to repair the relationship before bedtime. And the Bible tells us this, doesn't it? Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Because they found that when teenagers go to bed and they're in conflict with their parents and they haven't resolved it, every time they go to bed with that relationship being not sorted out, the anxiety and depression in their brain builds up each time more and more, because as the brain processes the day and remembers the conflict, it secretes some kind of hormones in there that cause the brain to be more distressed and more depressed. And after they did that research, they were helping parents to mend the relationship with your teenager before bedtime. Even if the teenager caused it, don't say, well, they started it, they must come and apologize. You go and help mend it, because teenagers don't always know how to do that. They now found that adults have the same thing. So any adult, any relationship that isn't worked out and resolved well before bedtime, and it's not always possible to do that for a number of reasons, but when we do that, when we resolve it before bedtime, we help to protect the well-being of the brain. And so it's important to think about that. So how we have relationships that lower conflict is firstly by being loving and kind. Good relationships need regular expressions of mutual kindness. And when we're being kind to one another, then that helps to lower our stress and make us feel safer. And then if something goes a bit wobbly or someone does something out of character, then we think, oh, they're just having a bad day. I won't get bothered about that. Maybe they're tired. And so we don't let it become a conflict for us. We'll kind of treat it in a positive way and give them the benefit of the doubt, as we say in England. Show appreciation as well, because it's resentment that often leads to bitter conflicts. And the more someone will thank us and appreciate us, the less likely we are to have an argument with them. So remember that and say thank you to other people as often as you can. And when pastors say thank you to their members and anyone involved in the service or doing things behind the scenes, the more often they say that, the happier those church members will be and be less resentful or miserable about their job or cause problems, because often they just don't feel appreciated. And when we do that, when we show them appreciation, it really helps to put a glow in their heart. These are actually two of my grandchildren actually trying to show empathy for one another. So focus on the other person's emotions, listen to their feelings and express your compassion. Be sad when they're sad and happy when they're happy, as Paul says, because when we show understanding for other people's emotions, we help them to feel safe and comforted. And those are things that will lower the conflict between you. And be helpful. Ask how you can help other people and do the things you know they hate, or do them together so it doesn't feel so bad. Avoid letting people struggle on their own. Work together, because when we work to carry each other's burdens and we support one another, again, there is less resentment, we feel happier, we feel cared for, and we are more likely to be peaceful and not have a conflict. And then protect your relationships, because underneath most conflicts is some kind of relational insecurity about not feeling understood, not feeling cared for, not feeling appreciated. So when we make a relationship secure and say, I love you, I'm committed to you, I'm never going to leave you, you're wonderful, and you're the best husband I could ever have, then it lowers the stress in the relationship, the risk of having a conflict, because I feel secure. I know that you love me, you're going to stay with me, I'm special to you, and that helps. So express your commitment often, even if you think, oh, well, we're married, they know I'm committed. It's just good to say, I'm glad I married you, or, you know, something like that, that helps them to feel your commitment to them. And perfect love casts out fear. So every time we create fear in what we do and say, we increase the risk of a conflict, because it causes stress, and the stress is more likely to lead to a conflict. But even when we try our best, we might do everything possible to do all the right things, to be appreciative, to be empathic, to care for people, to support them, to be committed. Even when we do everything we can, there are some people who are just, they just want to have a fight. They're just going to have a conflict with us, like Nabal. He just wanted to pick a fight with anybody. He was surly and rude and difficult to live with. And some people, they're just really hard to change. That's their mood, and it's difficult for us to make a difference to their way of thinking. So they tried their best. David had done everything they could to build a good relationship with Nabal and avoid conflict, but still it happens. So we need to accept that we can do our best, but the other person doesn't always respond in the way that we would like. So how does conflict escalate? So when we experience, say, a criticism or a lack of support or a lack of connection and empathy, or little appreciation when we've done something for somebody else, we start to feel stressed, resentful, and a bit negative inside in different ways. And then it's much harder for our brains to handle conflict well. Because when there's stress or anxiety or fear, then things like cortisol and adrenaline get released into our bodies, and we're more likely to become verbally aggressive, to shout or to abuse each other's feelings, or even become violent. Because when we're stressed and we feel at risk and we feel afraid, our brain shuts off our empathy part, like a shutter comes down in our brain, and the brain is focused on keeping you safe, defending you. And so when the brain is working to defend you, to make you run away or fight or whatever, then it doesn't want to think about what other people are thinking. Its focus is on preserving and protecting you. So you don't have empathy, you don't care for others, you are just fighting for yourself. And when we do that, then we are much more likely to fight them, to say things, to raise our voice, which then triggers the other person's stress hormones, and they're less likely to be empathic towards us. And so the situation can spiral out of control, and the conflict will escalate and become more and more aggressive. And that's what happened when David heard about Nabal. It really triggered him. He got super stressed, and he just lost control of how he would normally think and behave. So there's kind of a distress cycle in our lives, which we can understand. And this is a simple way of thinking about it. So if we don't feel cared for by God and by others, and we feel hurt, we feel resentful, we feel unappreciated, and we start to feel stressed and self-protective, then cortisol and adrenaline are released, which stops us listening to other people and being kind and compassionate. And so we're more likely to say things that hurt them, do things that make them afraid, and become annoyed and irritable and aggressive even. And then when we behave like that, the other person starts to feel uncared for and hurt, and it will make them feel more like they want to fight. It blocks their ability to show care to us. So then we have two people who aren't feeling cared for, who are getting more and more stressed, who are then starting to talk to each other and do things to each other, which escalates a conflict. Fortunately, there's another way to help our brain to manage conflict better. Because when we experience empathy and we show empathy, when we have compassion shown to us and we show compassion, when there is kindness, support and appreciation, then the hormone oxytocin and dopamine, the positive, warm, glowy hormones, get released into our body, and they help us to feel safe, happy, loved and loving and more peaceful. And that helps us to then manage our brains better and manage our conflicts better. So when we're relating warmly to others, we connect with the rational and thoughtful and caring and empathic parts of our brain. We can access that part of our frontal lobes, and we can show care. We can respond wisely and kindly and calmly, humbly, etc. And lower the chance of a conflict, because we can, a soft answer turns away wrath, as the wise man said. And so when we are able to do that, we can lower the conflict in the people around us, even just by saying something like, oh, it sounds like you're really frustrated, or that sounds distressing, or I'm so sorry that you're feeling like this. It can help just to calm the other person down a bit. And Abigail's kindness and generosity helped David to avoid a violent revenge and make a better choice. Her kindness started to calm his brain down, and he realized then he'd made some stupid decisions. Because when we feel cared for by God and others, then these positive hormones are released. They enable us to listen, to show empathy, to be kind, to be compassionate. And as we care for others, then they feel this glow too. They feel cared for. They start to feel the oxytocin in their bodies, and they can also process their emotions better and show care for us. So it's quite important to think, which cycle have I got hooked into? And if you find you're going into the distress cycle, think, wait a moment, what can I do to start to get into the compassion cycle? It's not so easy to do, but the more often we do it, the easier it is. And the more that we are showing compassion and care and appreciation in our relationships, then we're more likely to be in this space, and the relationship can tolerate things that might annoy it and are much better, and be more considerate, more just accepting and saying, oh, well, you're just having a bad day, and not get so reactionary towards the behavior. Also, the more we experience positive emotions, it helps us to manage our conflicts better. So when we are experiencing love and joy, gratitude, those things always lower conflicts. When we are experiencing hope for our future, or doing some nice hobbies, having a good laugh, experiencing peace in our life with a bubble bath or a nice walk or a peaceful Bible verse or a candle. When we are being filled with wonder at the world, inspiration, and we feel valued. All of these things help us to feel positive, stronger, warmer towards others, and more considerate. And they help us, the more often we do these things, they help us to lower the conflict in our lives and the lives of others. But there are times when we do need to talk about difficult things that have happened. And it's important, when we need to address something, to choose a time when both people are relaxed and think about the warmest and kindest way to bring up the topic. It's also useful to give the other person time to think about the issue before you discuss it, because sometimes we have been thinking about something and a problem, and we're resolving it in our mind, and we're thinking what we need to say, what we need to do. And we've been thinking about it maybe for a couple of weeks before we say, oh, we need to talk about this. But maybe that's a totally new idea for the other person, and they're startled. Oh, I didn't know this was a problem. So you've made them startled, you've made them a bit stressed, maybe a bit frightened. And when you ambush someone with an idea like that, it's very difficult for them to respond calmly, because they've suddenly startled by the topic that you want to bring up, and they might feel afraid about what you want to say, what you think about them. And so be aware that you need to start it warmly, kindly, give them time to think about things too, so that the conversation is more balanced and fair. And whenever we bring up something tricky, warmly acknowledge the other person's hopes, desires, and challenges in the situation. So express your care for them, and then express your concerns in a kind and non-judgmental way. And this is actually how Abigail related to David. She warmly acknowledged his hopes and his desires and his challenges. She showed her care for him, and then she expressed her concerns. You really don't want to have this bloodshed in your history book, so it's best to make a different decision. And that was then how she expressed her concern. But by showing the warmth and love first, she opened his heart to hear that comment better. And she made it sound, she expressed it kindly. And he was, yeah, that's a great idea, Abigail. I go with that. Thank you for helping me, because it had been done in a gentle and generous and kind way. So this is really important. I'm just going to give you an example of this with a teenager. So your teenager comes home from school and they're so excited because they've got invited to a party on Saturday night. Wow, I've got invited to a party. It's going to be so amazing. And we're all going to go over to Peter's house and his parents are away. And as he talks, your alarm bells go off. You start to stress. You think, uh-oh, a party, parents not there. What's going to happen? Drugs, alcohol, sex, all the bad things, thoughts go through your head and you panic. And you can say, no, of course you're not going to go to a party. Don't you know that all these terrible things happen at parties? You can't go to a party like that. And the teenager will probably stomp out, slam the door, maybe not speak to you for a few days. But you can do it like this. Wow, that's amazing. You got invited to a party. That's so lovely. I'm so glad you have great friends like Peter who invite you round. And I know it's really exciting to go to parties, and I'm sure it's going to be fun. The one thing that I really want for you is that you stay safe and happy. And that's my goal for you. And you're going into a situation where there could be some bumpy things to manage there. So let's think about what they might be, some of the challenges, some of the obstacles to your happiness, some of the things that could be risky. And let's work out how you could manage those well. Let's assess the risk and think about what you would do in those different situations so the party can be the best and safest for you. And if you get into any trouble and you want us to come, we will come straight away and pick you up and take you out of there. So that's a different way of responding to the party. You might still feel quite stressed about it and quite concerned. But the important thing is that you acknowledge their desires to go to the party, the joy of having friends, the joy of being invited, that we care for them, and then go to, and I have these concerns. Don't say but, say and. I have these concerns. Let's think how we will manage them. So when we whisper, lower our voice, then instead of raising it, a gentle answer turns away wrath. As soon as we whisper, speak calmly and kindly, and use respectful language, it also lowers the other person's stress level and ours. Both people will calm down. The more we raise our voice, the more we will naturally escalate the stress in each other and escalate the conflict. And then listen well, listen carefully, listen first. James says listen first, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and then slow to become angry. The more we listen to others well, then the more likely they are to listen to us too. So listen carefully, sum up their ideas, and check that you've heard them well. So what you're saying is you really want to go to the party. It's going to be on Saturday night, and Peter's parents aren't going to be there. Is that how I understood that correctly? So you just don't make any comment, just tell them what you've heard and check that it's okay. This is a really important way to show that you're truly listening to what they're saying and you're not lost in your own thoughts about or your panic about the party. And then express your concerns warmly, politely, respectfully, clearly, and collaboratively. So Bernie and I created this way of talking about a problem that makes it a positive conversation. And it goes something like this. In this specific situation, not you always or you never, when this specific thing happens, not when you do, but when this specific thing happens, I feel because. And it would really help me if you would do this specific thing. So give them the clear thing you want, and then I could help you by doing this. This is just one idea. What ideas do you have that would help us to work this out together? Now, if you want to take a picture of one slide, this is really useful. It helps to transform a complaint or a nag, which can be negative and cause the other person to feel stressed and maybe have a conflict with you. It helps you to express your concerns in a warm, structured way without blame, without shame, just really clearly saying, this is what bothers me because, and this is what would help me because, and then I could help you. So they see there's some benefit in that. And then you invite their ideas as well. And this works in lots of situations to help manage a conversation. And you can even put this on a piece of paper and give it to each person in a conflict and ask them to write out the answers to these things. Check them, make sure they're non-blaming and non-shaming, and help them to share them with each other. If they can't talk to each other, you can just swap the papers over and say, do you have anything to respond to this? Any questions? They write on there, then you swap them back. So this can be a really useful way of saying to your teenager, you know, when there's a party of teenagers and the parents are there, I feel quite anxious because I know things can get out of hand, and it would really help me to know that you have a way to manage those situations and escape if you need to. And I could help you by coming to take you away from the party, and I'd feel much happier about letting you go to the party. This is just one idea. What ideas do you have about how we can work out the party issue together? So when we talk about together, this really helps when we admit first our contribution to the problem, however small. When we say, yes, I realize I wasn't helpful because I did this, even in a small way, it helps the other person to calm down, to feel safer. They're not being fully blamed. We're sharing the responsibility, even if it's just a tiny amount. It's important to try and do that. Whenever we use words like, we can solve this, this is our problem, and us, we use these inclusive words, then we both on the same side. The problem is over here and we're over here and we're trying to solve it together. And so that doesn't polarize us. It brings us together to work on it. And then use the word and rather than but. So you want this and I want this. So how can we have both? Because and brings you together. If you say you want this, but I want this, then there's a polarization. So just using that one word can change the outcome. And aim for win-win, because it's more important to protect a valuable relationship than to win an argument. When you win an argument, we often lose the vital trust and closeness in the relationship because one person's won and the loser feels hurt and sad. They may withdraw. They may not want to interact with you for a while. And Paul says this, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. In humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. And this is this win-win situation. Now, there's a funny story that Bernie had and I had in our marriage. So we were both studying family therapy when our children were teenagers. And we thought it would be really useful to have some well-managed conflicts in front of our teenagers because we realized that many teenagers and children do not ever see their parents talk something through, work through their differences, resolve their conflicts in an adult conversational manner. So occasionally we would bring a fairly safe conflict to the dinner table. We would discuss it together in front of the children, invite them to help us and show how we can have collaborative conversations. So we were at the dinner table and we had started off trying to have a collaborative conversation, but it didn't go too well. Something happened. Probably I got triggered by Bernie, by him saying something that was probably fairly normal, but for some reason it touched a painful spot in me. Then I might raise my voice and then Bernie might raise his, and this is what happened. So we were talking louder and louder and louder and really forgetting that our children were there until our middle son, Nathan, banged on the table with a really hard bang. Bang! Mum, Dad, stop, he said. You are behaving like children. And we both, goodness, how embarrassing. And then he said, you should know better. You are studying family therapy. What are you doing? And then he said to Bernie, he turned to him and said, Dad, listen to Mum with your heart. Listen to her feelings. They're really important. And I thought, wow, that's really nice. And then he turned to me and said, Mum, listen to Dad with your brain because he has some very sensible things to say. Now, he doesn't remember that conversation, but we do. And Bernie and I both stopped. None of us can remember what we were arguing about, but we thought, wow, this is profound. Our teenager has taught us that I am expressing my heart story and you're expressing your brain story about this problem. And those two languages can't hear each other very well, particularly when the heart is hurt and stressed. It doesn't want to hear rational thought because the shutters come down in the brain that cuts it off from like sensible thinking. And it's just trying to preserve itself. So we realize that when the heart is distressed, the emotions are high, you have to calm the emotions before you can have a rational conversation. Now, it says here it can take 40 minutes or more for the emotional part of the brain to calm down when it's got aroused in that way. But now we know it can take up to 90 minutes or even longer sometimes when the brain has been highly aroused by distress or by a conflict. But you have to calm the emotional part down before you can have a rational conversation. So know how to do that calming. It's really important. So we learned a lot from our son there. So the outcome of that is we need to learn how to soothe one another during stressful times rather than add to the stress. Because if we add to the stress, we're just going to make it harder to resolve the situation. So stick to one argument at a time. Don't keep pulling in extra things that add more stress. Just deal with one simple conflict or non-simple conflict at a time, and help to calm each other down and talk about what each of you need in that calm way with that process I wrote. Try to maintain a warm sense of humor. If you can find some humor in the situation and see the funny side of what you're doing, then, but not laugh at each other, that can help. So when we calmed, when we have a bit of humor, when we've had plenty of sleep, or in England, we have a nice cup of tea, then it calms us down so we can have more calm conversations. And then we need to find a creative solution. And you all know how to do this by making a list of possible solutions. And then each person rates them out of 10, see which gets the highest score, and think, okay, that one we scored at a 10. Let's try that one. That was the one that scored highest for us. We'll give that a go. We will try it for a week and see how it goes. And this can be helpful to try any solution just for a week and know you're not stuck with that forever and ever. So try it for a week and then say, how did it go? What worked well? What would we like to change? And how can we improve on it to solve our problem better? So this is one way of working through. Once we've really listened to people and heard them, then we can work out what's best for both of us. There's a book called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, and it's called Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And he talks about why we have conflicts, why we have differences. And he says this near the end: the next time you find yourself seated beside someone from another matrix, another way of thinking, someone who is in conflict with you, try this, he says. Don't just jump right in and have a fight. Don't talk about morality until you found some points of commonality. Care for each other. Have that warm startup. Show that you care for them, because that will help to calm them down. Or in some way, establish some trust. So appreciating one another, helping one another in some way. When you've done those things that lower conflict and show that you're connected, then you have the right to, to bring up an issue if you want to. But start warmly with praise, with a sincere expression of interest and an open mind to listen to their perspective. Be curious about why they do what they do, why they believe what they believe. Don't feel you have to jump in and tell them your side of the story. Listen to them first, and then they're more likely to listen to you. And then Jonathan says this lovely phrase: we're all stuck here for a while, so let's try to work it out. Yes, we have to live on this broken world, and the best thing we can do is to try and work with each other in ways that lower conflict. Ellen White says this: when united with Christ, members will solve problems, church problems, with sympathy, tenderness, and love. So the secret of that is helping people to really connect with Jesus, to experience his love for them, because when they really experience God's love, then they're much more able to show love to one another and resolve their problems with sympathy and tenderness. The Bible sets before us a model church. They are to be in unity with each other. When believers are united in Christ, the living vine, the result is that they are one with Christ, full of sympathy and tenderness and love. Again, this is this being united in Christ, being filled with his love, his peace, his joy. When we are one with Christ and all that he is, then we have more love to share with one another in resolving our conflicts. Excuse me. And then she says this: when you go to those who you think are doing wrong, remember, it is often your own perspective. It's not an absolute that they're doing something wrong. It's maybe just your opinion. So when you go to those who you think are doing wrong, you must have the spirit of meekness, of kindness, and be full of mercy and good fruits. And Abigail was certainly full of good fruits, raisins and dates and things. So by bringing forth the good things, the gifts, as well as her mercy and her meekness and kindness, she was able to resolve the conflict. And that's what Ellen White tells us too. But there are some times when a situation is unresolvable and one person has to lose. And the person or group who gains and wins what they want needs to show lots of compassion, understanding, support to the person who loses. So say, for example, my husband gets a job in America and I have a job I love in England. We cannot live in between. We can't manage them both. How are we going to do this? So if we choose to move to America and I am away from my family, my work, everything that meant something to me, then we would agree to have a way of being able to pay for me to come back regularly when I needed to see the family, maybe to do some work over here, so that there's a way to support the person who doesn't get their first choice, so they don't feel they're losing out completely. How do we support them to get things that will help them tolerate a difficult situation? Do whatever you can, as often as you can, to help them cope with difficult situations when that has to be, and bear one another's burdens. So well-managed conflicts bring us closer together, because when we realize that the conflict is there to help us listen, to understand more about each other and accommodate each other in different ways, then it increases our understanding of each other's needs and views by listening. And we begin to develop unselfish ways of win-win solving our problems. How can we both benefit from this? How can we both get our needs met in this complicated situation? And if we can't, how can we show mercy to one another? And this leads to practical expressions of love and kindness that help to reduce the hurtful conflicts in our relationship. Jesus said this, "As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. And I have told you this, so that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you." And I have sometimes found it in difficult conflict situations to ask God to show me how he sees the other person. God, please give me your eyes so I can see the person here as you see them, as your precious child. Help me to see them, to understand them, to love them as you want me to love them. And as I have done that, I've often seen something in their life, seen why their goal is so important to them, seen what's at the heart of their conflict with me, and find a way to accommodate that and find a peaceful solution. So I wonder this evening, what can you do differently that might change the course of your conflicts? What have you learned that you've thought, oh, that's an idea. I'd like to try that. I wonder if that would make a difference. How can you be the peacemaker that God is calling you to be in the conflicts that are around you, in your family, in your workplace, in your churches? What can you do to make a difference? And maybe you'll feel a bit shy, but you could still start to be kind to people, show them appreciation, help them where you can, and see what difference that makes to start with. What can we do together to create warm, caring churches, organizations, and families where hurtful conflicts are less likely? Because then we can be peacemakers and we can be the children of God. Here are some useful resources. So the first one is lists of hundreds of kind ideas that we've put on our website at the TED. So if you're short of kindness ideas, there's plenty there to go and find. Then scottishconflictresolution.org.uk was the organization that I volunteered with and where I learned a lot about how to manage conflict. Then there's the Keep the Heat link, the title to search for, the hashtag, and find out this little quiz, which is on the Scottish Conflict Resolution website. For couples, if you can speak English, there's a Toucan Together app on the phone, and it's Toucan Together like the bird, and it's called Relationship Advice. And there's a quote on the front of the app, and it says Karen, and that's actually a quote from me because I helped the developers of that app with actually their conflict module. So it's a free couple relationship app with loads of ideas, like having a free marriage retreat on your phone. One of you gets the app, and then you need to invite the other. You can't both get the app. It won't join you up. So one gets the app and then invites the other person. It has great modules, great teaching in bite-sized chunks that you do on your own. And then you come together and talk about what you discovered as you learned. Then there's a book called Everybody Wins by Gary Chapman of the 5 Love Languages. And he wrote this book, The Chapman Guide to Solving Conflicts Without Arguing. So he's written a good book about everybody wins and how to do that. And then the lady who did the research on what people were really arguing about, Sue Johnson, has written a book with a Christian guy, Ken Sandifer, called Created for Connection, which is an excellent book for helping you with your relationships. So I hope that this evening you've learned something about conflict that was new to you, and I pray that you will find some new ideas in there to resolve your situations. Let's pray now, and then we'll have questions. Father God, we thank you for your great love for us, that you're making peace with us, and your peace is already in your heart for us, and you want to bring us back into very close relationship with you because you love to be intimate with us. May we open our hearts to be intimate with you and learn from you how to love one another, how to resolve our conflicts, how to find peace in really difficult situations. Often we don't know what to do, but your wisdom can help us to find new and creative ways that we can participate in peacemaking processes. And when they don't work, help us to heal our hearts, to learn from them, to protect ourselves from the bitterness of that damage, and find ways to care for others and continue to be peacemakers wherever we are. So thank you for each person here. Thank you for their love for you and their love for others. And may that love continually grow and expand as they understand more of your love for them. In Jesus' name, amen.